Also clear that she's making this statement because she doesn't want no consensus to mean that the consensus then innately was not releasing the report. Democrats want to make it obvious here that they are in favor of getting this out there. And so when she says that the chairman, Gaetz, betrayed the committee, I think she's talking about the fact that he spoke about what the deliberations were in the room, or even gave, in the instance of one reporter who caught up with him in the hallways, his own rationale for voting not to release it. In his words, he said that he didn't think the committee had the jurisdiction anymore, which is actually the same argument that the House Speaker made when he said he didn't think that the Ethics Committee should vote to release this report, because typically when you stop being a member of Congress, and Gaetz has resigned his seat, the jurisdiction of the Ethics Committee no longer applies. And so I thought it was notable that she would come out here and say that. It's also notable that they say they're going to meet again after the Thanksgiving break. December 5th is the date that she gave. And again, I'm reading our Capitol Hill text chain, which at moments like this is just pinging all the time. But to underscore, she's making this statement because she didn't want people to think that Gaetz was saying that there was an agreement among the group to release it. And so this is rare for a whole lot of reasons, Nicole, but the Ethics Committee is just so typically shrouded in mystery. She makes the point there, Susan Wild, that they typically do things unanimously. And so the fact that this is breaking down along party lines, the fact that they are talking about this publicly, frankly, even the fact that we knew when they were meeting to vote and what they were voting on, all of that is so atypical. It's almost spoiling for a Capitol Hill press corps that is so eager to know what happens in ethics, but rarely ever gets the opportunity to until the committee typically unanimously votes to release what they've been working on. And so all of this is very rare, very unorthodox, but we're watching it happen in real time as Susan Wild comes out and says, all right, this is not actually decided. It's really just a question mark still, and we're going to come back after Thanksgiving and reconvene on it in some form or fashion.
So, Ali, our colleague Hallie Jackson interviewed a lawyer for two witnesses who went before the House Ethics Committee. That lawyer made some important points in interviews. I believe he did an interview with ABC News as well. One of them was that these two witnesses that provided testimony to the House Ethics Committee, his quote was, "have no political dog in the fight. They're not partisan actors seeking an outcome." The lawyer for the two witnesses to the Ethics Committee investigation also said that the two witnesses saw Matt Gaetz have sex with a 17-year-old, but didn't think he knew she was 17 at the time. How much more was under investigation than the actual sort of heartbeat of the federal criminal probe, which was whether or not he knowingly had sex with a minor?
Well, that's part of we don't know what we don't know, right? And that's why we're seeing people push to have this ethics report released to the public. It's also because the Ethics Committee has been investigating Gaetz on and off since 2021. Yes, around these allegations of having sex with a minor, but also paying for sex, illicit drug use. You'll also remember there were those moments where people were talking about him going to the House floor and allegedly showing videos to his colleagues of lewd things, saying lewd things on the House floor, just conduct unbecoming of a member of Congress. So all of those things are sort of swirling in this pot. But to the question that you ask, it's why people want to see this report. They want to know not just what the lawyers and the witnesses spoke to the committee about, but underlying payments from places like Venmo and other things that we've heard about in sort of a casual fashion because they're out there and not under subpoena. But when the Ethics Committee is doing it, of course, it adds the heft of a congressional investigation to it. And so that's why people are pushing for this. I do think it's notable, and there's two more mechanisms in addition to the way that we could see this come out if the Ethics Committee meets again and someone on the Republican side has a change of heart and ends up crossing party lines to say, let's release this. You have a Democratic Congressman, Sean Casten, who is saying that he's going to introduce a privileged resolution to try to get the full House to vote on this, basically an extra pressuring mechanism that would require a majority of the House to vote on this. The only other time that Congress has tried to do this is back in the 90s, and it failed. But the difference here is that there are actually a good number of Republicans who are no fans, to put it lightly, of Matt Gaetz. And I guess I could see a world in which they might want to join and vote that way, but that would put them in crosshairs of the speaker and of the president-elect from their party. So there's just some really fascinating dynamics happening here as House Republicans, many of them have been vocal to me, to other reporters on camera about the fact that they, A, are happy that Gaetz is no longer a member of their body, and B, they're happy to have his dirty laundry aired because they are no fans of him and they'd like to see him dragged in the public view effectively. But whether or not the Ethics Committee report is going to be the vehicle for that at this point is unclear, but it also pretty much seems unlikely.
Ali, are the sex tapes that Republican senators talked about being handed and asked to watch, I believe the Republican senator from Oklahoma described being shown a video that Matt Gaetz described as crushing ED drugs, chasing them with energy drinks so he could go all night. Is the creation of the videos or sex tapes and the dissemination, was that something that was investigated by the House Ethics Committee?
We're not sure, again, because this committee typically doesn't come out and say, hey, we're investigating this member for this reason, and we'll let you know the findings in about 4 to 6 weeks. They do not talk about what they are doing. Typically, it requires a good amount of reporting for us to find out if ethics committee investigations are even being opened. And then when they are ready to release their findings, that is when you see the committee do what they did today, but typically with no fanfare, no reporters outside, and certainly no readout of what happened. That is the way that things typically go. But because of the fever pitch around this, because of the fact that Gaetz is an attorney general nominee, it changes the fabric of the entire process. And that's why you're seeing, I just can't stress enough how rare it is to see these ethics committee members talking at length or frankly at all about what they are doing behind closed doors. And the way that the Speaker of the House is weighing in, that other members are weighing in, I think is a really important thing for us to keep in mind as we go forward here and as this committee then says that it'll meet again on December 5th. I think the other thing that's worth pointing out, Nicole, and you point out Senator Mark Wayne Mullen, who used to be a House member, he had those critical things to say of Gaetz, and then over the weekend was on the Sunday shows kind of towing the Trump transition line on Gaetz and the other nominees. So I think everyone's coming home to the president-elect at this point.
This is the oldest story in the Trump story. We just need to take a break. I do want to press you, Mary, on whether there's any reason to suspect that whether they're videos or stills, these images described by the Republican senator from Oklahoma are something that would be scrutinized as whether or not they were consensual or whether or not that, again, has any intersection with the ability of the department to investigate sex crimes. Ali Vitale, thank you for your reporting. David and Mary, stick around. Still ahead for us, what could be the last line of defense as Donald Trump is set to take a wrecking ball to our institutions and the rule of law in America, the judiciary? It could be holding the line for all of it, how Democrats are moving to bolster and strengthen that guardrail. And later in the broadcast, new questions about the Secretary of Defense selection, Mr. Pete Hegseth, and his qualifications for that role. We'll talk about that and hear from Senator Tammy Duckworth, an Iraq War veteran and Purple Heart recipient, on Hegseth's views that women should stay out of combat. All those stories and more when Deadline White House continues after a quick break. Don't go anywhere.